Hey there, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight, the adjunct teachers strike at Columbia College enters its second month. A new investigation explores why so many cases of missing black women and girls are unsolved in Chicago and what can be done about it. And school districts are struggling to fill certain teacher vacancies. And now to some of today's top stories. Some teachers and faculty at Columbia College are locked in the longest strike of adjunct professors in history at 31 days today. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten joined teachers on the picket line in downtown Chicago today. The nearly 600 striking union members walked off the job over what they say is administration's elimination of hundreds of part-time faculty jobs and increasing many class sizes. They're calling on Columbia to maintain courses and class sizes and to provide equitable access to job security. Passengers traveling through Midway may notice some different dining options at the airport's reopened Central Market. It's the culmination of an 8-year, $400 million modernization effort.
And Midway's concessions redevelopment program took advantage of this space in the airport to construct more local brands for residents and visitors to enjoy. The updated food court is home to a mix of existing restaurants and a few new ones.
The revamped Central Market is located at the intersection of concourses A and B and includes Connie's Pizza, Beecher's Handmade Cheese, Dunkin' and M Burger, among others. Throughout the airport, Midway's concessions redevelopment has expanded from 40,000 to more than 70,000 square feet. The airport's first lounge, the Club MDW, is slated to open next fall. Developers on the far south side are hoping a new type of home will lay the foundation for more affordable housing and equity in that community. Crews for the Hope Center Foundation erected the organization's first model modular home in the Roseland neighborhood. The group is leading the Reclaiming Communities initiative to create a pathway to homeownership for low to moderate income residents in the Roseland neighborhood, which, along with nearby communities Pullman and West Pullman, have traditionally experienced disinvestment. The project aims to remedy violence and poverty by supporting residents with financial education and homeownership counseling. The next 10 homes are expected to be delivered over the next several weeks, with another 20 to 25 homes coming in 2024. Up next, a new investigation explores why so many black women go missing in Chicago and what can be done about it right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Black people comprise about 2/3 of all reported missing persons cases in Chicago over the past 2 decades. The vast majority of those missing persons are black girls and women between the ages of 10 and 20. That's according to a new investigative series on the disappearance of black women and girls by City Bureau and the Invisible Institute. It's an investigation that presents many questions for the Chicago Police Department about how detectives treat missing persons cases. Joining us now to tell us more are the two authors of that report, Trina Reynolds-Tyler of the Invisible Institute and Sarah Conway with City Bureau. Thanks to you both for joining us. So, as we've discussed, you've investigated a number of cases in which black women and girls have gone missing and how the police respond to those disappearances. Trina, first to you, what prompted you all to undertake this investigation and what did you find?
Well, it's interesting. When I was training as a data scientist, I had an internship at the Human Rights Data Analysis Group, and the first document I learned to scrape using statistical software was a FOIA request which had the open missing persons cases in the city of Chicago. Fast forward to Beneath the Surface, a project that uses machine learning to parse through narrative text of police misconduct records. We were able to identify 54 complaints between 2011 and 2015 related to families and staff frustrated with the way Chicago police treated them when they were attempting to report someone missing.
Sarah, tell me a little bit more. What did you all find?
Sure. So within the initial first 54 complaints, we found that they were grouped around neglect. Oftentimes, most of the complaints were from Black women reporting their children missing. And within that, we saw a couple threads. One of them was that when mothers or sisters would go to report a loved one missing, they would be told to wait 24 hours or to be denied a missing persons report. So that was one of our first initial findings in our investigation.
Which is a violation of state law.
Yeah, and CPD's own policy. Their directives say that no one can be told to wait any amount of time, nor can anyone be denied a missing persons report for any reason in Chicago. And then from that, we started to see that people in these complaints were saying that they had received abusive language from police officers. They had felt that sometimes police hadn't actually looked for their loved one. And those complaints were really the beginning point for our investigation to then look into over 1 million records over the past 2 years. And that was comprised of police missing persons data, medical examiner death data, as well as underlying investigative documents and other reports.
It's a lot of records to look through to come up with this report. So, as you mentioned, you found that many Black Chicagoans didn't think that police were taking their cases seriously enough, not doing enough to find their loved ones. Here's a clip of Tammy Pittman, mother of Shantae Bonahan, whose body was found in an abandoned garage.
It's a bond between a mother and a daughter. Your child is missing. It's nothing good. You know, you be thinking, what is this, where they at? Every moment you thinking, where are they, where are they? The first time I went to the police station, they didn't help me. And they were like, she's grown, she probably ran away. I was like, she didn't run away, and she's not answering her phone. And they didn't take it seriously to me. They just brushed me off, basically, they did. Police department failed me. Chicago Police Department failed me.
You all also report that in 4 cases, detectives said that the missing person had returned home when the loved ones were like, no, obviously they have not returned home. What has been CPD's response to your reporting?
It's interesting, when provided the findings on numerous occasions, they have had nothing to say. Mostly they've said, we investigate cases across zip code, race, and sex equally. But in fact, their data in the past 5 years is missing 45% of the officer arrival time. They themselves cannot even do their own measurement of the ways that law enforcement are responding to missing persons cases.
You all also spoke with another mother, Shirley Enoch Hill, talking about the disappearance of her daughter, Sonia Rouse.
The police just weren't doing anything. It's like they didn't care. Because she's Black and from the South Side, nobody is trying to find her. It was like because she was a substance abuser. It's like that her life didn't matter because she was an alcoholic and the lifestyle that she was living. But she still was somebody's child. That was my child. And he started telling us, well, you know, she lived this life and, you know, and she was doing this, but she still deserves to be found. That don't make her not be a human being and somebody's family love. I love my child.
Sarah, you all spoke with more than a dozen families who say that they felt neglected and that the police department response had been inadequate. What do they blame? Is it racism? Is it incompetence? Why do they think police have ignored these cases as they believe they have?
Families express to us that they feel it's both racism, sexism, and the zip code that they live in. They felt that their loved ones were often blamed for their own disappearance. That was one of the findings in our reporting, was that for people who are not found, who don't return home, there's oftentimes underlying public health issues that are driving missingness. That could be domestic violence, it could be substance use disorder, it could be someone struggling with depression, you know, a variety of things. And that was, I would say, a common theme that came up when we talked to families, is not only the aloneness and isolation that they've experienced. You know, all of these people are really not connected to one another in many ways. It's a very isolating experience to have someone go missing. And then, you know, when you are turning to the state entity, which is the police, to help you, oftentimes families would say, you know, that their loved one was blamed. Thinking of, you know, Daisy Hayes, she went missing. Her daughter Teresa Smith recalled to us that a detective said, you know, well, your mother frequents the liquor store. Daisy Hayes, her body's still never been found. There was footage from the Chicago Housing Authority building that she lived in, that she went into her apartment and never came out of it. A man that she had been seeing was seen then later taking a suitcase out of her apartment and throwing it in the trash. You know, we went through underlying investigative documents that showed that the FBI was communicating with CPD about that case, that, you know, there was a 1 in a million chance that they'd be able to recover her body from a Gary, Indiana landfill. And it just kind of goes to one of those things where people can be experiencing a lot of vulnerabilities. Black women and girls, we know, you know, disproportionately experience violent crime in Chicago, and these are some of the most vulnerable people. And when they do go missing, oftentimes their loved ones feel that they are blamed for their missingness.
Is human trafficking ever considered a possibility when these women go missing? And do you ever get the sense that the police officers or the police department has followed that?
Well, it's interesting, right? If you were to submit a public records request for the human trafficking instances in the city of Chicago, you won't find much information. When we are looking into the disappearances of some of these folks, we know that by the nature of them, for example, the instance of Takayla Tribbett, 14-year-old in 2019, who ran away from a DCFS group home literally a day after she entered this over 30-year-old man's arms, he began to beat her, right? She was later found in a Gary, Indiana alley. Her case is closed non-criminal in the missing persons data, even though a homicide investigation opened as a result of her case. You see that there was clearly some underlying some kind of themes that relayed that human trafficking was occurring. And but it's, again, you know, your Chicago Police Department, if you were to look at their data, you would think that Chicago isn't a hotspot for child prostitution. It is, and, you know, even in the complaints that we were able to identify through Beneath the Surface, there was one complaint where an off-duty officer delivered a 14-year-old girl to a human trafficking sting. Once he delivered her and drove off with a passenger in his car, law enforcement brought them in. He was able to resign, and the female passenger apparently gave up a separate officer who was later convicted of trafficking mostly runaway girls in Chicago.
There's been a newly formed, we've got about a minute left, a newly formed state task force, Sarah. Do you have any expectations, and what is that task force expected to do?
Well, State Rep Cam Buckner and State Senator Maddie Hunter, they formed the task force. There are, you know, everyone from experts who've researched human trafficking to impacted families. Daisy Hayes' daughter, Teresa Smith, is actually on the task force. They really don't want to rebuild the, you know, wheel, I guess. Like, they're really looking to Montana, which had a task force that looked into this very same issue, but with indigenous people in Montana. Minnesota as well, you know, had a task force on missing and murdered Black women and girls, and now has the nation's first office for missing and murdered Black women and girls in that state. So the state task force really does want to look at the underlying public health issues that are driving this crisis, and also to understand how there could be improvements or alternatives to policing with this issue.
Okay, big issue. Great reporting from the two of you, Trina Reynolds-Tyler and Sarah Conway. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate it. Up next, how a statewide teacher shortage is disproportionately affecting students of color. Despite many sounding the alarm on a pandemic-related teacher exodus, the number of new Illinois public school teachers and principals is actually increasing, according to a Watchdog report. But that's not the case across all teaching positions. According to Advance Illinois, school districts across the state are struggling to fill special education and bilingual teaching positions, and they say it's having a disproportionate impact on Black and Latino students. Joining us now with more on this are Robin Staines, president of Advance Illinois, Tyler Hunt, a fifth grade teacher at Georgetown Elementary School in Aurora and a senior policy fellow at Teach Plus Illinois, and Arkesia Washington, a special education teacher at Bolingbrook High School. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. Welcome back. Robin, let's start with you. Please tell us a little bit more about the findings. What challenges are school districts up against here?
So the report takes a look at the teaching pipeline as a whole, right? So how are we doing on recruiting, preparing, getting folks into classrooms, and then keeping them there? And there's some good news, which is great, and there's some troubling news. The good news is we have added about 5,400 positions over the last couple of years. That's a 4% increase. That's amazing. More on why if you want. The second is that we are diversifying both the number of candidates who are coming into the profession. There are more folks going into teacher preparation programs. That's up by 16%, well above the national average, which is great. It's a more diverse set of candidates than we've seen, about twice as diverse over the last 10 years. And the overall teachers out in classrooms are also more diverse, but that's not keeping pace with how diverse our students are. And then as you described, another major finding is that we've got particular absences or shortages in special education and bilingual. And most tragically, students of color, students from low-income households are dramatically more likely to be in districts with high vacancy levels, more than twice the vacancy rates or more than the rest of the state. And that is, those are striking differences, about 4 times as many Black students as white students, about 3 times as many low-income students as non-low-income, and that's a huge problem.
Okay, so a lot to get into here, and I want to dive into all of it as we can. Arkesia, as a special education teacher, what do you think is behind some of these shortages? I feel like it's traditionally been challenging for districts to hire special ed teachers.
Something that's probably being challenging behind that is the retention of the teachers. So making sure that we have a lot of conversation, connecting the community with the teachers, so that the teachers are able to understand the benefits of community and staying with the children and feeling supported within their environment, building relationships with the community, building the relationships with the teachers and the students and the staff, and understanding the importance of the diversity of having teachers in special education, teachers that are ESL, teachers that are in bilingual, and making sure that they all connect and building a community around it as a relationship.
As you're speaking, your fellow teacher Tyler is over here nodding her head. When a school can't fill this kind of need, whether it's bilingual or a special ed teacher position, what kind of impact does that have?
It has a couple different impacts. When I think about, just particularly I think about students of color. So when you don't have a teacher of color there, there's a couple of things that happen. The first thing that happens I think about is students not being able to see themselves as teachers. You have to see someone doing this action or profession in order for you to see yourself doing that. I also think about, like the other teacher said, with recruiting teachers. We have to create positive experiences in a school environment with students of color. If we create that positive environment, then that'll make them think about it like, hey, you know what? I can see myself as a teacher. I had positive experiences when I was in school, and so I can come back and be a teacher.
Arkesia, I would imagine there's also a cultural sensitivity that's missing when a teacher of color is not in the room in front of students of color.
100%. We want to make sure that when you're in the classroom, you have diverse learning. You also want to make sure that you are being culturally responsive when it comes to teaching a child, and not just culturally responsive from a broad perspective, but from having a relationship with that child as an individual. What do you eat for dinner? But not based off what I see in a lot of African Americans or other Black and brown kids eat for dinner off TV. But what does that specific scholar eat for dinner that's in front of you? So building that relationship with them and that component and bringing it to them. It also feels good for staff members to not be burdened down as being the only people of color or having low percentages, being the low percentage of people of color within a classroom. That support that we need as staff members, again, that helps build that retention that we need so that we can have African Americans or people of color and longevity when it comes to being in education, so that we can have voices within education that are diverse when it comes to decision making for our scholars.
Robin, as I mentioned, it's been traditionally difficult, challenging for districts to fill those two positions. Give us a sense of what they're up against when trying to fill teaching positions, those the tough ones in particular.
So the vacancy rates for special education teachers is about twice the state average. That was a problem coming into the pandemic. It has not improved with the pandemic. It's not quite as severe for bilingual. One of the things that the state has been doing, they've done a couple of things. One, they've done some targeted scholarships to really try to entice and take away financial barriers for people going into those fields. They've really expanded. We created a bilingual set-aside for Minority Teachers of Illinois Scholarship. So those are all really good strategies. One of the other things that they've done is created some shortcuts. We have got a huge uplift in the number of teachers who can get into the classroom on short-term approvals or provisional licenses. And that has just skyrocketed over the last few years. In fact, over 16% of bilingual teachers right now are teaching on provisional licenses. I just want to repeat that. I mean, that's a significant number of teachers who, you know, we've cut some corners. I hope we're cutting the right corners in the right ways. Clearly, there was a reason why we felt we needed to do that. But I would add, we don't know a lot about what the impact is on the students in those classrooms. Are those teachers going on to, in fact, earn their licenses? So if it's going to continue to grow like that, that's probably something we need to take more of a look at.
And that was going to be my next question, if we know yet what the impact is, or if there are concerns about the impact of teachers who've gotten a provisional license.
We don't, but I will say that, again, this affects students of color and students from low-income households disproportionately. They are more likely to be in classrooms being led by teachers with short-term approvals or provisional licenses than other students. And so again, I think it behooves us to figure out whether that's okay, that's been a good shortcut, whether that's something we need to tighten up.
Tyler, what do you think can be done to increase teacher retention and recruitment?
There can be so many things. The first thing I think about is when you're recruiting a teacher, what kind of environment are you recruiting them into? Have to plug Teach Plus. That is who I work with. They are a teacher leadership organization that just amplifies teacher voices and education policy issues. And so Teach Plus recently this spring, they passed the Racism-Free School Act, which requires schools to train teachers on how to report and let me say that again, on how to report incidents, recognize and report incidents of racial harassment. And so that's just kind of like bare minimum training that can be done. Again, making sure that you are recruiting teachers into a welcoming space, if that makes sense. But teachers can do, or school districts can do even more than that. Instead of having just one sort of implicit bias training for like new teachers, something that can be done is to have regular training on cultural competency, on, you know, parent involvement, what that looks like at different levels. I could go on.
There's a ton. You can go on. It's okay. Arkisha, we know that, you know, still teacher turnover has proven to be particularly greater at schools that have primarily students of color. Similar question, you know, what effect does that have, that turnover? What effect does that have on those students? But also, what do you think can be done to improve teacher retention and recruitment?
It has a very poor effect on students. It weakens their ability to build relationship skills. It weakens their ability to trust, so that the next person that does come in front of them as an educator or support staff, it's going to be harder for them to be able to connect with that child, because now they have trust issues or abandonment issues, because teachers in the past that they've built relationships with have had to leave the field for many different reasons. But just like Tyler, I also want to just expand on my district here at VBSD, that one of the main things that we build on is community, community, and community. So when a teacher is within a school, in order to build that retention, we want to make sure that we are building it with community. We are building it in support with mentorship. We are making sure that we're not just looking at every scholar as just a student that's in front of us, but also looking at them as our neighbor, also looking at them as the 15-year-old that just got their work permit at the Myers up the street. So they're helping us check out our bags. They're walking us to our car. So when we're making decisions for them and when we're building relationships for them, we're not just building it for them as a student that's in front of us, but as someone that's in our community. And that also allows us to be connected with them as well, so that the turnover rate is less likely to happen because their teacher is now more connected in that community and at school.
All right, that's where we'll have to leave it. A lot that I'm sure the four of us could talk about on this issue, but we've got to let it go there. Arkesia Washington, Tyler Hunt, and Robin Staines, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you to be here. Thank you for having us.
And that's our show for tonight. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and at a special time, 11 o'clock, for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. How a Latino Muslim-led organization is helping those experiencing homelessness. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Stay healthy and safe. Have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to give back to its community in Chicago and beyond.